I never told my son Daniel how much money I really make. He always thought I was just a simple woman working in an office, living in a small apartment. But the truth? I earn $50,000 a month. I've built my life quietly, saved every penny, and worked hard for everything I have. No one knows, not even Daniel. That's why when he called me that Tuesday afternoon, I felt a chill. His voice was nervous, like he was hiding something. "Mom," he said, "Olivia's parents are visiting from Europe. They want to meet you. Can you come to dinner on Saturday?" I asked quietly, "Do they know anything about me?" He stammered, "I told them, you live simply, work in an office." I felt my blood boil, but I stayed calm. If they wanted to see a poor, weak, naive mother, I would give them that, and then I would see their real faces. I spent hours choosing the worst dress I owned, old shoes, no jewelry, and messy hair. I looked like a woman beaten by life. That taxi ride to the fancy restaurant was quiet, but my heart was racing. I had a plan. I was going to act poor. I was going to act weak. But I knew one thing: by the end of the night, nothing would ever be the same. The restaurant was stunning, the kind of place where even the chairs seemed expensive. The doorman held the door like he was guarding a palace, and I stepped inside, trying to look small, timid, scared. And there they were, Daniel in a crisp, dark suit, looking uneasy, and Olivia with her perfect dress and fake smile. But my eyes went straight to her parents. Margaret and Richard Carter were like royalty. Margaret was in a sparkling emerald gown, jewels all over her neck and wrists. Richard in a tailored gray suit with an enormous watch that screamed wealth. I could feel their eyes judging me already. I walked slowly, holding my worn tote like it was a lifeline. I smiled weakly at Daniel, and he looked shocked. Olivia barely nodded at me. The Carters barely hid their disdain. I sat at the end of the table, the one farthest from them. The menus arrived, all in French. I pretended to squint at the words, confused. Margaret leaned over with that fake sweet smile. "Do you need help?" she asked. I nodded timidly, pretending ignorance. Little did they know, I was watching everything, every flicker of judgment, every glance of pity. The conversation began like a test. Margaret talked about her travels, her hotels, and the fancy car she rented. Every word dripping with wealth, every word designed to make me feel small. I nodded. "That's lovely," I said. I didn't need to act impressed for long. Inside, I was already plotting. I wanted to see how far they would go, how little they knew about real strength. Olivia kept glancing at me, tense, as if she was afraid I would expose something. Daniel looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat, hiding his face. Then came the questions. "And what do you do?" "Clara?" Margaret asked sweetly but venomously. "I work in an office. I do simple things," I said quietly. Their eyes narrowed. Richard nodded, pretending to smile. "Administrative work." "Honest work, right?" "Of course," I agreed. Every word they said was meant to make me feel small. Every word made me angrier, but I stayed calm. They didn't know they had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. Dinner arrived, beautifully plated, tiny portions that looked more like art than food. Margaret bragged about each dish, the cost, and the gold leaf on the dessert. I picked the simplest item, ate slowly, pretending not to know how much it cost. They were watching for a reaction, expecting awe. But I smiled faintly and said, "This is lovely." Inside, I felt the tension building. They were desperate for me to be impressed. They didn't know I had already achieved everything they were proud of. Margaret leaned in, soft but venomous. "You must struggle living alone at your age, yes?" I nodded gently. "I manage. I don't need much." But I could feel their judgment like a weight pressing down. Olivia fiddled with her napkin, and Daniel's hands clenched under the table. That was when I realized something important. The more they tried to make me small, the more I wanted to reveal my truth. Then came the bribe disguised as kindness. Margaret and Richard offered a small monthly allowance to help me. My blood boiled. They wanted to pay me to disappear, to be grateful for crumbs, to vanish quietly. Daniel tried to stop them, whispering, but I held up my hand. I wanted them to see how transparent they were. Olivia's face went pale. She realized too late that her parents had underestimated me completely. I leaned back, still calm. "Let me ask you something," I said. "All the money you've spent on Olivia, did it buy respect? Did it buy love? Or just obedience?" Their smiles faded. Richard opened his mouth but hesitated. Margaret blinked, unsure. I continued, telling them about my life, how I had raised Daniel alone, worked 12 hours a day, studied at night, and learned everything on my own. Every word was true, every word a mirror showing their shallow lives. I watched their faces change, shock, confusion, embarrassment. They had expected a timid, grateful woman. Instead, they met someone strong, independent, unstoppable. And Daniel's eyes were wide. He finally began to see me not as a simple mother, but as a woman who had fought for everything she had. I told them about the early years, living in a small room, barely enough to eat, working while pregnant, no family to help, no handouts. Margaret and Richard had never known struggle. They had never built from nothing, and I could see the realization dawn on them. This woman, they thought weak, had survived alone, raised a son, and built an empire quietly. Olivia sat frozen, ashamed. Daniel stared, amazed, and for the first time, he felt real pride in his mother. I told them about my career, how I had learned finance, accounting, and administration all alone, how I had signed million-dollar contracts, made decisions affecting thousands of people. And all while raising Daniel alone. Every word cut deeper than any insult they had thrown. Richard shifted uncomfortably, Margaret's lips pressed together. Olivia looked ashamed. And Daniel's eyes sparkled, finally seeing the truth he had never known. I asked them questions, simple but sharp. Have you ever built something alone, faced the world with nothing, raised a child without help? Margaret fumbled. Richard muttered excuses. Olivia looked away. Every answer was weak compared to my story. I saw it in their eyes. They knew they had judged wrong. They had assumed they were superior. And that night, they learned humility. Back home, Daniel hugged me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I always thought I knew, but now I see everything." He finally understood that the woman he thought simple was a quiet powerhouse. I smiled. "Sometimes, it's better to show strength quietly, son." Meanwhile, Olivia and her parents were left to digest the reality that appearances don't equal value. Weeks later, Daniel thanked me again. He told me how proud he was. I reminded him, real power doesn't shout. It observes, it builds, it survives. Olivia and her parents never treated me the same. Respect had finally replaced judgment, and I had done it without raising my voice, without showing off. My life, my story, my strength, it was all mine, and finally, everyone could see it. I smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes the truth is the best revenge, and that night at the restaurant would stay with all of them forever.